All right, today we are diving into a real medical mystery. It all starts with a very strange clue: unusually sparse, brittle hair. But that's just the first thread we're going to pull in a really complex genetic puzzle called Menkes disease.
I mean, think about it for a second. Kinky hair, really stretchy skin, and severe brain issues. At first glance, those things have absolutely nothing to do with each other. So what on earth could possibly be the single thread that ties them all together? Well, that's the mystery we're about to solve.
Okay, so just like in any good detective story, we've got to start with the clues. What are the telltale signs that make doctors even begin to suspect this incredibly rare diagnosis?
And what's so wild here is just the combination of things. You see the sparse, brittle hair that actually gives the disease its nickname, but then that's paired with this super elastic, kind of doughy skin, really low muscle tone, which is a condition called hypotonia, and then tragically, seizures often start within just the first few months of life.
So you put all those pieces together and you get a diagnosis: Menkes disease. And the most important part of this definition, the part that cracks the case wide open, is the phrase, a disorder of copper metabolism. And suddenly, there it is. That's our first huge lead. All of those seemingly random symptoms are somehow connected to how the body handles copper.
Okay, so if the problem is copper, the next logical question is why? Why is the body having this problem? To figure that out, we have to go deeper than the symptoms. We have to go right down to the source code, which brings us to the faulty gene.
And boom, here's our culprit. The whole thing, every single symptom we've talked about, it all boils down to a harmful mutation in one specific gene, ATP7A. This one tiny piece of genetic code is the root cause of everything.
So how does this faulty gene get passed on? Well, Menkes disease is what we call X-linked recessive. That just means the gene, ATP7A, lives on the X chromosome. Now, since guys have an XY chromosome pair, they only have one X. If that one has the faulty gene, that's it, the disease shows up. But women have two X's, XX. So if one is faulty, the other healthy X can usually pick up the slack, making them carriers but not usually showing symptoms. And that's why Menkes disease almost always affects boys.
So we know what gene is broken and why it's inherited, but how does that one broken gene mess up the entire copper system? Let's break it down. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like a package delivery service inside your body.
Okay, so normally, here's how it's supposed to work. You eat food with copper in it, and that copper gets into the cells lining your gut. Easy enough. Then this ATP7A protein, it's like the worker at the loading dock. Its job is to grab that copper and load it onto the trucks, the bloodstream, to get delivered all over the body. But in Menkes disease, that loading dock worker, the ATP7A protein, is broken. It's not doing its job. So the copper gets in, but it can never leave. It's literally trapped inside the gut.
And this is what leads to the central, kind of mind-bending paradox of Menkes disease. You've got all this copper piling up, stuck in the intestinal cells, but none of it can get to the brain or the bones or the blood vessels, the places that are screaming for it. So the body is essentially starving for copper, even though there's plenty of it around. It's what we call a functional deficiency.
And why is this copper starvation so bad? Well, it sets off this devastating domino effect. See, copper is like a key that turns on a bunch of super important enzymes. Without that copper key, the enzymes don't work. So, domino 1, the enzyme for strong connective tissue fails. That's where you get the doughy skin. Domino 2, enzymes for brain function shut down, and that leads to the awful neurological decline. It's just one system after another starts to fail. Now, to really get a handle on just how critical this whole copper delivery system is, it is incredibly useful to look at its genetic mirror image. This is where we get to a tale of two very different diseases. So on one side, you've got Menkes disease, which we now know causes a massive deficiency of copper all over the body. But on the flip side, there's another condition, Wilson disease, that does the exact opposite. It causes a toxic overload of copper. It's literally two sides of the same metallic coin.
So what's behind this opposite problem? You're not going to believe this. It's a mutation in a gene that sounds almost identical, ATP7B. Yep, just one single letter difference, A versus B. And that one letter is the difference between copper starvation and copper poisoning.
And this chart just lays out that mirror image perfectly. Look at this. ATP7A, deficiency. Why? It can't absorb copper from the gut. ATP7B, overload.
Why? Because it can't get rid of excess copper from the liver. One is X-linked, the other isn't. The symptoms are totally different. It just goes to show you what a delicate balancing act copper is in the body.
But listen, this isn't just some interesting genetic trivia. This stuff has huge real-world consequences. And that brings us to the real bottom line here. Why this code matters so much.
Here's the crucial point. You absolutely cannot treat a copper disorder if you don't know which gene is broken. Think about it. Giving extra copper to a patient with Menkes disease, that might be a life-saving treatment. But giving that same copper supplement to a patient with Wilson disease, that could be fatal. The genetic diagnosis isn't just important, it's everything.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap the main takeaways from this whole genetic mystery. First, Menkes isn't about not getting enough copper. It's about distribution. The copper gets trapped. Second, a single broken gene, ATP7A, is the villain that starves the body. And third, its genetic opposite, caused by ATP7B, shows us the danger of having way too much copper. And that's why understanding this is so critical. A correct diagnosis is the absolute first step toward any kind of management.
And all of this really leaves us with a pretty fascinating question, right? Not just about these diseases, but about biology in general. The story of Menkes and Wilson disease is this powerful reminder of a basic rule. The only difference between a medicine and a poison is often just the dose, and in this case, the location. So you have to wonder, how can one single element be both a life-saving nutrient and a deadly toxin, with the switch being flipped by just a single letter in our DNA?